Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Vermont, Senior Warden. Thank you for coming to this afternoon's annual meeting. And I will now call the meeting to order and introduce our rector, Father Robert Hendrickson.
So technically, has everyone had a chance to watch all the reports? Good. I mean, I could do my 52-minute presentation again for you, but if you're okay, then we'll just go ahead and get started. So really today's just designed to be a Q&A session. And so if anybody has questions about anything either in the reports, feel free to ask those. We have, there was some trouble this week with the submit a question button online. Apparently somebody was saying that they had some issues, but other people said there were no issues. So if you don't hear me say the question that you submitted online, then please just go ahead and raise your hand and we will attempt to answer that in the moment as we can. I have one question that was submitted online that I'm going to answer and at least respond to in just a second. And I want to say hello to the folks who are on Zoom. So what we'll do is if you have a question, we'll just ask you as we solicit those to sort of raise your hand, sort of to indicate that you might have to flail about violently, so we'll see it. But you're facing everyone in the congregation can see you, so you can sort of have a nice sort of dialogical exchange if you have a question that we're not getting to. The question that came in online was about budgeting. So here it is. In 2018 and 2019, facilities were 10% of the church's operating budget, 167 out of 1.7 million one year and 171,000 out of 1.7 million the next year. According to the pie chart in Herb's presentation deck, facilities will be only 8% of the church's operating budget in 2022. And this will be the third year at 8%. So the question is, how does this decrease square with my call for a campus that is intergenerational, supports radiation care,
this one
improves accessibility, and provides more openness to the community? The hope is that we can return to high levels of funding across just about every area of parish life. I mean, that's the aspiration. One of the realities of the last couple of years is that with the beginning school closing this past year, that cost around 60,000 plus per year. Our play studio was another 20-something thousand per year. Facilities rentals was another kind of, couple of $17,000 to $20,000 per year. So it all starts to add up after a while, right? And so this couple of years of pandemic have given a pretty significant hit to our bottom line. And so we reached those kind of difficult decision points where we had to decide, well, do we fund the AV upgrade so that we can continue to offer online services in the way we wanted to do? Do we continue funding musicians singing as part of our Sunday services through the pandemic?
I just love them.
And this year's a little bit challenging because we're not quite back at full speed yet, right? So with the school closure, we've had to restart the school. It's not you. A bunch of money to get them situated and ready to go. This is a metaphor. If the clergy stop talking, the noise stops. So the year is uncertain, right? So luckily we have a new clay studio operator who has already started and has already started getting students in their clay studio. As the pandemic seems to hopefully be sort of reaching something of a more endemic stage, we can begin to look at facilities income again. But I think our approach has been that the most conservative budget we can craft as possible is the one to go with, because the uncertainties are so high. And so what where that came down to is the question of do we prioritize in this pretty difficult period sort of mission or maintenance? Where do we weight things? And I think we decided we for the last 2 years we've weighted mission over maintenance so that we can continue to care for people in ways we have always done, because it's not as if the pastoral needs have lessened over the last 2 years, right? So one of the opportunities I think for us in the next year, 2 years is as we begin to develop the campus master plan, the campus mission plan I talked about,
Oh, great.
we can begin to then reassess sort of our facilities funding and how do we sort of bring that back up to where we want it? How do we recover some of the things we weren't able to spend money on over the last couple of years? But I think just from a really practical point of view, I think we've continued to prioritize mission, continue to prioritize ministry. And I think that was the right choice. I would say that my sense as folks have come back and stayed connected to St. Philip's in a way that many churches did not experience. I mean, many churches are in a substantially more difficult place than we are right now. And I think part of our decision over the last 2 years to prioritize remaining connected, providing pastoral care and ministry opportunities has paid off, for lack of a better word, if you want to use sort of investment terms. And so my hope is that as that commitment to mission continues, and as the parish sort of recovers in terms of sort of more normal financial operations, as some of these other things come online, that we'll then be able to make some of those important decisions that we haven't been able to make the last couple of years. And here, the bottom line in every nonprofit operates with a series of competing goods. Everything you could do with the money is good, right? So where we are is trying to say, okay, what's the best thing we can do with the money that you all give us? What's the most conscientious decision we can make? And that's sort of, we keep arriving at caring for people, providing opportunities for ministry, children's formation. Those are the things that are going to keep people connected as we make our way through this. So that's kind of where we landed. And I think Herb, did you have something you wanted to offer? Most of you will know, but Herb Burton is the parish treasurer. And before Herb grabs this thing, you should give Herb a round of applause.
Oh, well, thank you. I just wanted to amplify a little bit of what Father Robert said. First of all, the beginning school, in order to get the beginning school up and running, we actually spent about $50,000 in refurbishing and making that area much more attractive. So, the question was, are we doing things to make the place more attractive? And we spent a lot of money doing that. Go up there and take a look. It's, it's repainted, the playground is redone. There's a lot of there. And then, over the last couple of years, most of the stuff that we did was off the operating budget. Like that was unplanned expense to do that. The new organ console was another thing that we funded, essentially off budget. All the AV stuff to make the place more attractive for people who couldn't get in here, was essentially done with extra money off budget. So, we've been spending a lot of money making this place more attractive.
Any follow-up questions to that particular question? Yeah, Jen. Oh, Mary is going to come around. So Mother Mary will be coming around. She has a microphone. She's been dying to do this.
I've never needed a microphone. People would probably like the opposite.
So one benefit of the microphone, just so you know, is that it goes into the loop system so that folks with hearing aids can hear better. So that's one of the reasons we do ask people to use microphones, even if they're loud.
I don't know what off budget means.
So off budget means, for example, if we budgeted spending $100,000 on facilities for a year, but we spent an additional 30 that came from donations, that $30,000 expenditure is off. So the roughly, I can't remember the exact number in terms of AV upgrades, we're basically off budget. The $50,000 we spent to get the school up and going is off budget. Those are not things we plan to spend. And they're generally funded by either some overage from last year or donations that were not budgeted for. Any other questions about this particular sort of question? Good. Well, what else can we talk about? We've all got nothing but time. It's Super Bowl Sunday. Do we have any questions online? Wow. Is there anybody with a question online that we see? Okay, great. Not one.
I have one if you're listening.
Yeah. Oh, Mary just left with your microphone here.
Something about the rusty bell. Yes. It's bleeding down the front of the church.
This just became the most contentious meeting in parish history. I do think as we develop the campus master plan, I think that the things like that should probably be layered into it so that we can sort of have a kind of philosophical discussion that's layered into the kind of practical discussion to sort of say, do we want to, whitewash it, or do we want to sort of, abate the damage that's been done or whatever? Or is it damage at all? Is it just, oh, the bell coated? Yeah. Well, yeah, we're all rusting with age. So I don't want anyone to coat me. It's funny how I think when I came here, that was one of the questions I was asked in the sort of the course of the walk around, walkabouts for the weekend. And somebody asked how I would handle the sort of, the bell. And I'm always inclined toward patina. I like a sort of antiqueness about a place. And so, but I realize that that's not necessarily the best preservation decision either. So I think there's some tension there to work through.
Let me turn it up, or is it?
Yes, I'm supposed to be asking everyone on Zoom. We would love to hear from you in sort of short order, but if you can mute yourselves right now, that will help with some feedback issues that we're having.
I think.
Here are questions popping up. It says echoes, background noise. So. Okay. Very good. Okay.
No, we're not hearing anything.
To those on Zoom, you can feel free to ask any questions that you have now.
Father Robert.
Please go ahead, John.
Hello?
We have to mute our mics on this end. So if just so there's no feedback, if you want to go ahead and ask your question now.
You can hear me now?
Yep.
Herb mentioned that we had 385 pledges. It seems to me pledges can represent more than one person. So if you double that for an average family of 2, that would be close to 800 pledging people out of 1,600 members. I see that as about half rather than a minority of the parishioners per Herb. Is that correct or wrong?
It's neither. Here's an Anglican answer. It is both and. The challenge is that we have, not the challenge, we have a significant representation of folks who are older and folks who are single in that pool. So the average of 2 is probably not quite accurate, but I think you're in the ballpark of being onto something, which is that it's certainly more than 400 individuals. It's probably something more in the range of 600-ish, somewhere in that range, depending on how we look at it. So yes, I mean, but what I will say is that that is actually pretty standard for large parishes. So for example, we had in Denver, we had 3,500 households or 3,500 members. And we had about, I'm trying to remember the last year, about 600 pledges. So you can see that the percentage seemed low initially, but now in my first parish, Christchurch, New Haven, we had something like, I can't remember how many households, about 150 households and about 120 pledges, right? So the percentage was quite high because it's a much smaller place. And what happens over time in a lot of larger parishes is that someone trips on the speed bump out there and they're called a member, you know? And so part of this is definitional because you've got to figure out, you know, and so there was a nice job of going through the books that happened before I got here. And it has so that they reduced the number of people we were defining as members and that sort of thing. But I do wonder if after the pandemic, we're not due for another round of going through our membership lists and sort of figure out where people are and that sort of thing. But yes, it's not, you know, it is not, you know, 400 out of 1,600, John. But you know, I would say even 600 out of 1,600 is probably too low. I mean, I think, you know, if people want to, you know, see the kind of ministry that's been at the heart of this place for so long continue, and it's not a new problem. So let me also, I will say, when I was going back, I was looking at the Vestry meeting minutes from 1947. And they were in there talking about how we need an every member canvas because people aren't giving enough. And then there was a sermon that I heard from Father Ferguson, where he was saying, "You're only giving a nickel when you could be giving a dime." You know, so this is you know, this has been an ongoing issue, and there are some systemic things, and I can say more about that. I don't want to bore everyone, but I will say one of the differences here from other sort of what I would call sort of resource large parishes is that when you have a significant portion of folks who are winter visitors or snowbirds and folks who come from out of town to live for a little while and then move back to their home, which happens all the time. We all know folks who have done that. What that means is they don't always leave the kind of legacy giving that you might leave if you grew up in the same church and your family had been in church all your life and then you died in the same church. That leaves a different kind of legacy. And so I think that there are some interesting complexities here. Plus we're a university town. A lot of our folks who are involved here, they come, and I was thinking of Mary Margaret and Jonathan Sprinkle, they come for 3 or 4 years, do an amazing amount of work while they're here, and then they go off somewhere else, right? So there are complex cross currents here around giving that I think we just have to be realistic about. They're not good, they're not bad, they're just the truth, right? And so the sooner we can sort of be clear-eyed about that, the better response we can develop over time. Mary, you were raising your hand. Right. Right. Yeah, there are two pieces of that. One is, I think Bonnie, when identified, the last number I heard was, I think, $82,000 a year, roughly. That was people who gave, but didn't pledge, and gave regularly for years, had given. And so that's something we have to sort of do a better job of accounting for and sort of developing language around. And then the other piece of that is what we're seeing is as more younger families attend, sort of pledging may not have been a part of their family background. Many of them are coming from backgrounds that are not Episcopal churches. And so the idea, it's like I was in a meeting the other day and we were talking about a service and someone said, well, we should just take a free will offering and people can give, but, you know, which is true. I mean, but it's not language we would necessarily use all the time in the Episcopal Church. So I think some of this is going to be a little bit of enculturation around why and how pledging works here, and adaptation on our part, that every time a new member shows up, we're a different community. And so we're going to have to reassess how we do some things periodically because we need to account for changes in culture that we're probably not always that rapid or quick to account for. Herb has got something, and then I'll come this way. The question was, which question was I answering? Oh, Mary's, so that what I was answering was Mary's point was that we have people who give regularly who are not pledgers. And so part of that is, so we were talking about some of the dynamics and sort of what impact that has in different ways and where some of that might come from. Yes, it does tie into back to off budget. Thank you. So that it actually does connect back to the initial question about what is off budget. If we get $80,000 in additional giving a year, that's wonderful, but it's not $80,000 that we can proactively plan to spend in a way that is as disciplined as we would like, because we don't have those numbers ahead of time to build a budget. And one of the things that I am a firm proponent of is that you budget with what you know you'll have, not what you wish you will have, you might have. And so I think one of the kind of, and that's why some of our estimates are fairly conservative, because I think we've got to go with what we know and not just what we might get. Herb.
Yeah, is this on?
Yes.
This on, now is it on? Okay, well, just a couple of just numbers. The number that John Wazak quoted was actually the total number of givers. It included what, Mary's comment. We have over 400 people who give regularly, not all of whom have pledged. And that's one of the reasons I emphasized in my talk about the importance of pledging. But also, the number who actually pledge has been running under 300 every year. We haven't had, well, not about 300, not under. We are down to 322 last year, and we haven't, this year we aren't up to 300 yet, because we always get people who pledge a little after the beginning of the year, but it's more like 300 is what we're really getting in terms of family unit pledges.
Yeah, and that gives you, I mean, the parallel to that also, I don't want to say the flip side or whatever it is, because it's all just part of a piece, is that over the years, sort of people have gotten more generous. The folks who are pledging have gotten more generous over time, and our average pledge has gone up significantly in the last couple of years. But I think, and I think it's a legitimate question in congregations about do you spend your time sort of cultivating and working with folks who are developing that kind of pattern of generosity, or do you kind of go back all the time to the kind of maybe outer ring of folks who give you $20 a month or whatever, which is wonderful to get. But I think one of the hard things in churches is you've got to figure out how do we prioritize and how do we sort of cultivate as wide a base as possible, recognizing that the vast majority of our pledging comes from a relatively small pool of people. And so I think some of the dynamics are changing over time. I think people give online, they give to causes they like. I think where we saw this really in a pronounced way through the pandemic is whenever we would put out a call for giving to our partnership with St. Andrews in Glendale, or to develop the AV system, or I don't even remember all the different ways we asked, people responded generously. And so I think one of the things we also have to be cognizant of is it's not that there's not money, it's just in the wrong place. It's in your pockets. And what I mean by that, actually, I say that cheekily, what I really mean by that is part of what we're going to have to do is figure out how do we also align what the church is working on with the things you're passionate about, right? And I think that's the complementary piece of this, is following the energy you have with sort of mission initiatives at the church. And so it's always this interesting sort of dialogue between givers and vestry and staff and blah, blah, blah. But it's a kind of never ending dance. I've got one back here, then I'll, yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a great question. So the question online for the folks online, the question was basically, how do we adjust to the fact that a lot of folks don't give with like sort of physical paper, a check or cash, they give online sort of by swiping or by creating recurring gifts online. So how do we sort of simplify or create a kind of a more seamless sort of financial operation so that folks can continue to give to the things they get excited about? Is that a fair? Great. Yeah, that's certainly been my experience. My wife and I, I don't know the last time we gave sort of physically to something. It's almost all online. And we've got some sort of online functionality, and people can certainly go on the website. And that's how we were taking most of the donations to various things over the last 2 years in the pandemic, was almost all online. That sort of forced us to be able to do online giving. In Denver, we actually had iPads set up in the back of the church with swipe things on them, so that folks who knew they were going to put something in the basket could swipe their card. We also did it in such a way that, like, let's say we announced a mission, initiative, if we said we're going down to Nogales to do whatever, and if you would like to help support that, you can go back to the card swiper in the back and swipe to do that. So there are some very simple things that we could do that I think would actually make some of that much easier. And then, that's why we can't have nice things, sort of knock them over. So I think that there are definitely opportunities, and my hope is that our stewardship committee can sort of begin to, look at some of the different ideas and figure out, what's one question with these kind of things is not necessarily what's doable. You can do anything once, but what's sustainable? Like what's the practice we could develop that just becomes a kind of part of our regular flow of work, right? And so it's not like something we did for 3 weeks and that was a great idea and then we forget about it. But I think it's going to be crucial. Mary cutting. Oh, sorry. Oh, Mary, yes.
Well, actually, I was just going to say that Grace St. Paul's does pretty much what you're talking about. They've got a stand, a thing in the back foyer. When you come in, you just swipe.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's.
So talk to Grace St. Paul's.
Yeah,
they know how to
absolutely.
do it.
Thank you. No, I don't want to take your job.
Don't take my job.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Is this on?
Yep. we can hear you.
One of the things that rang a bell for me just a second ago was something that reminded me that the trend in giving in all kinds of ways seems to be specific rather than general giving. And it looks like that's the way we may be moving, and I'm sure we're not alone. The idea that if we could describe our programs that we think of ongoing and stuff, if we could describe those in ways that would be more specific and more passion catchable, I guess, we might find that we would get more donors. And I think the idea of just throwing money into a pot is probably, I don't know that it's on its way out, but we have to pick up the other side as well.
Yeah, and for folks online, not sure if you heard, it was Mary Cutting was sort of commenting that one of the things we'll have to figure out is, as the trend in giving goes toward being more specific with your giving, sort of more targeted, and away from sort of giving to a general fund, how can we respond to that and perhaps create a kind of a description of different aspects of programming and life here that might be sort of compelling to folks who are looking to give in a targeted way. And we certainly see that with the music program. People give to the music program all the time because that's something that brings them here and moves them. And people do that with outreach and various ways. And Herb, I'm getting waved to.
Well, I'll just put some numbers on this discussion. Actually, Mary's point is really good. Since I've been working on the parochial report, I was looking at all the outreach and just in 2021 alone, the amount of money we sent out to other organizations, including, some that you mentioned, the refugees, the Beloved in the Desert, the Christmas offering that was split up, the Cruzando Jubilee, et cetera. There are about 15 of those, and it's like $110,000. So it's all designated money. So anyway, it's a pretty impressive number.
It really is when you figure, and this is one of the things that gets tricky about a parish budget is someone could look at the parish budget and say, well, we're spending X on outreach. and we are catalyzing another $110,000 being given to the wider community. That is a huge, gift that St. Philip's is able to make available to the wider community. And the kind of capacity building we do, for example, when, someone serving from Beloved in the Desert, right? So the way that, for those who don't know, the way that works is someone will volunteer to live in intentional community at Beloved in the Desert. They'll then be placed at an outreach or an agency in the city, usually sometimes here at the church, but often at an outreach agency. That agency pays the program $15,000 a year to have a full-time, essentially full-time person who works and has the support of St. Philip's and the wider community as they grow and learn how to sort of do their job better. Many of them stay on with their nonprofits after the program year ends. And so if you told me as a business owner that for $15,000, I could have a full-time person who has outside support to help them grow in their work, and the chances were very high I would keep that person that I have spent my year training in the year after, that's a huge win. So for many of these nonprofits, they'll get someone for $15,000 that's probably worth, if you consider employee turnover, training costs, all that sort of stuff, it's as if they're getting an in-kind gift of another $45,000, $55,000. And so I use that as an example to say everything we do isn't just sort of money we send out, but it's also not just sort of hands-on projects that we do. There's also this capacity building we do for our partners around the city that I think is a huge and kind of underappreciated role that we play in the wider city. Anybody have any other questions? All right. Well, it's 1:36.
I'll ask another one.
Vestry election. So we'll announce the results of the Vestry election in just a moment. I will say, if you have questions, if you didn't want to ask a question in the room or something like that, please feel free to reach out to me or to John or to Herb or to Bonnie Wynn. Any of us will be happy to answer questions. I hope you'll have seen in the last couple of months, there have been reports in the Bell and Tower from our Vestry meetings to sort of update you on Vestry deliberations. One of the things we're committed to over this coming year is developing a greater degree of transparency so that you can see kind of what leadership is working on, because we also want that to be a dialogue where you can sort of respond to what you read and what you hear. I want to invite you all to participate in those conversations with us as you feel called. I will, the result of the Vestry election is that the Vestry slate was elected. So Roger Rain, will you stand up if you're a newly elected Vestry member and you're here? Roger Rainbolt and Meredith Mullins. Excuse me. And Erica Johnson is online, so she can't quite stand up. But she can stand up in her house, but there you go. Thank you to those folks who were part of our Vestry slate. I'm delighted with the group we've had now, and I will say that this has been, these last 2 years have been Vestry terms like no other. And so my hope is that they'll become more normal this year, but I can't guarantee that. So I'm sorry for that. But thank you for putting yourself out there in this work.
John Wazak has a question from online.
John, yes. John
Okay,
Wazak.
can you hear me?
Yes.
That's about 10 yeses in a row for some reason, but okay. My favorite subject, strategic planning. I read your 5 strategic goals that you've identified. I'm surprised that I don't see one that talks about achieving a solid financial base or something kind of as a bottom line. We spent a lot of time talking about finances, but that's kind of a comment, maybe a question. Number 5 on the list really interests me. Unchurched and retirees, trying to draw more of those kind of folks into church to receive a lot of the benefits of attending. Unchurched and retirees, I think, is one of the real opportunities we have, besides bringing a lot more people in on the young side. Can you comment on what thoughts the Vestry has along those lines?
Excuse me? Okay, good. So those five are ones that were identified in 2019 that we will revisit in this coming year. So I think your point about ensuring that we highlight sort of the ongoing need for financial sustainability will almost certainly be layered into that. The question about sort of unchurched and retirees, when I was called here, my letter of agreement, essentially the first 2 or 3 things in my letter of agreement were about intergenerational development, about sort of, and that's the work I'd done in the past before coming here. So the emphasis for the first couple of years was on sort of developing children, youth, and family ministries and building out those sorts of things. I would say, I think that it's now time to, and that requires an inordinate amount of effort when you are sort of making a swing. And I would say that now is the time to balance that energy out with an additional emphasis on meeting the needs of seniors and retirees in our community. So I think it's about sort of a strategic recognition that we now have to sort of make it intergenerational, not just sort of putting our sort of energy into one particular area. The unchurched, I'm just checking my watch to see how long I can talk. This is where I think there's a really interesting opportunity for St. Philip's and for the Episcopal Church in general, if we will embrace it. I think that the Episcopal Church is ideally situated to meet the unchurched where they are. Because I think folks who are longing for some sort of grounding, some sort of sense of connection and purpose, without some of the baggage that other churches carry with them, without some of, frankly, the trauma that other churches inflict on their members and on their young people. I think that, to me, is the precise kind of church that most people don't even know exists. And so I think the opportunity for St. Philip's and for other Episcopal churches is to be a place that is capacious in its welcome, because that's what we are called to do by the gospel. That's how we understand our mission imperative, is to be a place that is as welcoming as possible, and that welcomes them to something that is completely transforming, right? So it's not just sort of come as you are, then leave as you are, but it's come and be transformed and go out to love and serve. And so I think creating that kind of church is the way to sort of meet what unchurched folks are looking for and may not even know they're looking for. The other piece of this is there's this idea that belief is on the wane somehow or another. That couldn't be further from the truth. There are now more self-professed pagans, Wiccans, than there are Presbyterians in the United States. It's sort of stunning, right? So we have this idea that, oh, people don't believe in, no, they just believe garbage. You know, and what I mean by that is more people believe in ghosts than believe in the Trinity. That's not an exaggeration, right? You know, so part of what we have to do is we've got to get better at telling the story of God's love, right? We've gotten way too caught up in a lot of the kind of minutia, sort of, you know, the arguing about who's right or who's wrong or whatever. And what we're being called to do is an assertive proclamation of a loving God that will bring people back to find their foundation here. So I think in terms of thinking about opportunities for the unchurched, the piece of that that's important is it means we're going to have to go out and do it. Because just opening the doors and sort of saying, here we are, we're so wonderful, isn't going to do much for a lot of folks. Because in 2018, when Pew did a huge survey of religion, they asked young people, and at that time, I think they were defining as people under 35, what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word church?
Yeah, he was really interested.
You know what it was?
And parts of it.
Anti-gay. That's the first. Now think about that. For an entire generation of people, the first word that comes to mind for them when they hear church is anti-gay. And the next ones aren't much better. It's hypocritical, judgmental. So you wonder why people are unchurched.
I don't know if he's going to.
It's no big mystery.
Done or not.
The opportunity for us is the same God that a lot of these folks say they don't believe in is not one we believe in either. A judgmental, sort of wrathful, angry God who condemns them where they are and never wants them to grow. So the opportunity for us is to preach a different kind of faith, a different kind of way of being a community, and frankly, a different kind of divine love.
And
And I think if we do that, I think the unchurched problem solves itself. I think we have the question around unchurched folks is a largely self-inflicted wound on the part of the church. And it is our job to be part of repairing it, right? It's our job to be part of the work of reconciliation, to repair that damage that we have done to how people see the church and what God's mission is in the world.
Yeah, I think it would be fun.
That said, and like John mentioned a minute ago, we all have our sort of passions. One of mine is evangelism and how it's misunderstood. And you mentioned a second ago that it's going to take going out. And I think preparing ourselves to go out means that we have to reimagine and relearn what evangelism really is. And I think that that's really hard for Episcopalians. It always has been everywhere I've been, but I think it's a task it's an opportunity that we need to seize.
So I don't know what all those online can hear. Mary's point was that evangelism is often a challenge for Episcopalians, and we have to relearn what that means. It's not really something we have to relearn, though. How many of you I don't know, COVID's not a great time, but how many of you have, say, in the last couple of years, recommended a restaurant to someone? Right? I mean, how many of you have recommended a movie? How many of you have recommended, a million other things, a concert, whatever it is? There's a reframe that's necessary, because really what we're saying is what evangelism is speaking a word of joy into someone else's life, offering them the opportunity to be a part of that same thing that brings you so much joy. And actually, my experience at St. Philip's is we're actually kind of better at this than a lot of other places I've experienced. And I think it's because we have more non-cradle Episcopalians. I'm not saying anything ugly about cradle Episcopalians, but I think that if you come out of a Lutheran background or some other backgrounds, it's very natural. Like you just say, "Oh, I'm going to church on Sunday, and you want to come with me?" That's a pretty natural thing. A little less natural for Episcopalians. But I think if we can sort of embrace the idea that what evangelism is it really is about sharing something that brings a spark of joy in your life, and how can you welcome someone else into that same kind of thing? That's a relatively easy thing for most of us to kind of imagine doing, I think. Yeah.
I don't want to beat on this for longer than people need. But one of the things about it is beginning to realize that you evangelize where you already are. You're not going to stand on street corners and harass strangers. It's the people you already know. At least that's been my experience. Although I'll be at a dinner party and somebody, I'll mention the church, somebody asked me a question, and it's very natural, but we just need to know what words are not threatening, right, and what we can say comfortably.
Yeah. And Mary's point was that evangelism begins where you are, sort of in conversations with folks that you sort of naturally encounter from day to day, that you don't sort of go to strange places and begin, sort of declaiming from the top of a soapbox. Unless that's part of your natural habit, then sure, you can do that. But, and I do think for the parallel side of this, I think, is also that evangelism for the next generation, for the unchurched, is not going to be about an institution. It's not going to be, let me tell you how great our building is, how great whatever it is. Evangelism for the next generation is going to be, let me tell you about something that is completely life-changing, a place where you can find purpose and meaning into which you can throw yourself. And that's actually, I think, the people that what gets misunderstood is the aimlessness. I'll just say this, the aimlessness of the emerging generations. I don't think is disconnected from the decline of religiosity. And so I think the opportunity for us is to reframe this as a place of purpose and opportunity, where folks can come and be a part of something bigger than themselves, that can shape the way they see the world, so they can begin not to believe in not they have to sort of doctrinally assent to every proposition that we make, but so they can come and find an embrace here that makes them want to be a part of it, that makes them want to go out and bring other people into that same experience of life-giving welcome. So anyway, this is one where I can go on for a while, because it pairs with stuff that I get excited about. So anyway, I like it better than talking about Excel spreadsheets. I'll put it that way. Anybody else have any questions, comments, anything like that? Jen, yeah.
I feel passionate about the Jubilee Fund, which we take people's debts. And I was mentioning that to the anti-racism group one time, and people were wondering that it was still in existence. So I think that perhaps you could I think it would be a good idea to make more widely known the things, way people can help others.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the opportunity would be, we need a sort of a small mission group that's willing to kind of own that project. A sort of group of 2 or 3 people who are kind of willing to shepherd it a little bit. In part because we bought up a lot of the medical debt available in Tucson. So part of what we would then have to do is figure out, well, where do we go next and how do we make those decisions? And rather than sort of making them by fiat, fine doing that if you want me to, but I'd rather it be, I'd rather it be a sort of, something where the congregation sort of selects where it makes the most sense for that money to go next. And, so I think that, so if you'd be willing to be on a group like that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. There you go. It is, well, it is. And, and what I love about actually the Jubilee sort of medical debt relief is that it is such a cost-effective way of making a difference. I mean, the sort of the dollar for dollar benefit is so huge. Yeah, I mean, here's my frustration with it. It's nothing we can do about it. My frustration with it is that it's a Band-Aid on an absolutely broken system. But anyway, it's neither here nor there, I suppose. Anything else that anybody wants to offer? Good, Miriam. Yep, here you go.
Well, getting back to your retirees and how to attract them, I think it ties in with some of the other comments of making opportunities for retirees to come to certain events or programs or mission or whatever you want to call it that would attract the groups you want to target. Because for years we've been into, targeting young families and so on. So if we had more events that were geared to retirees, of course, I would say, like, if fixers would target, hey, retirees who know these things, come join the fixers, or whatever group you want to say, and then we would get them to come in and they'd get to know a small group, and that would broaden and they'd get to know others and they'd start coming to church regularly. So I think that's the way we need to do it, rather than, as you say, standing on a soapbox and proselytizing.
Yeah, I think sort of creating opportunities for that to happen organically is important, and then also sort of recognizing, that we're not a cruise ship, right? Sort of recognizing that we've got to find that balance between what's the kind of the kind of transformational thing that people want to sort of be a part of, and at the same time recognize we can't be an activity center. And so trying to find that balance between what will provide a real opportunity for someone to connect and engage, I think is important. Especially, I think, I feel like we are entering a time of good strategic decision-making on how to focus a little bit, and what I mean by that is we're not gonna be able to do everything for everybody all the time. And so how do we pick what we can do well, what only we can do, right? How do we pick those things that are opportunities for us as St. Philip's with the unique gifts we have? And so I think that there'll be there's some interesting, there's going to be some thrust and, what do they call that? Thrust and parry in a lot of this in terms of developing some really, I think, concrete mission opportunities, so that we can begin to do whatever it is we're doing as best we can, sort of do it in a way that honors the gifts that we have and that honors the needs of the community. And I think if we can do that, with that I think some of these questions in some ways will solve themselves. I mean, is my sense. And the worst we can do is fail horribly. Right? You know what I mean? The most dangerous thing most churches do is they don't do anything. They get paralyzed by trying to make a decision or trying to get caught up in processes or things like that. And I think that would be the big waste of this moment in our history, especially after the pandemic. So I think the opportunity now is for us to make some good judicious decisions informed by prayer and discernment, and then just move on and get to it. And I think that's sort of where things are right now. What else? Anything else? John, do you have any closing words you want to offer?
The only closing words I'd like to offer is a heartfelt thanks to the Vestry. I mean, this group, for those of you who don't know, has really worked very, very hard to address many of the challenges and opportunities that we have before us. And certainly welcome the incoming class and look forward to working with them. So, thank you.
So we're going to draw to a close, and I'm Father Peter, I'm going to put you to work. Do you mind saying a prayer? All right, good.
Maybe let's take just a moment or two in quiet and we'll say a prayer together. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. We thank you, God, for this gathering of faithful people. In our gathering, indeed, we give thanks for the ways that by your voice alone and by the grace that gives us ears to hear, we live. We strive as your people to live as you might call us and give us strength to follow where you lead. Thank you for the year past, for the many ways that you've been in our midst, in the midst of so much going on in our lives in this place and around the world. We give you thanks for the many ways that you'll be leading us forth in the year ahead. Bless our new class of Vestry members, bless our Vestry, bless Father Robert and his family, and bless us, Lord, that we might be to the community you've called us a blessing. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
So John, I'll invite you to bring the meeting to a close.
Again, I thank you for attending, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.